Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Tonight's movie is 1960's The Horrors of Spider Island, directed by Jaime Nolan. If there's one thing hosting this show has taught me, it's that you should never, never take a movie at face value, even if it's as worthless as the one you're about to see. When I first saw this film, I thought it was nothing more than your usual poorly looped, sleazy, cheap, worthless little wet fart of a movie that's usually foisted upon me for this show. But upon researching this opus, I found it was so much more. It turned out to be a very special, poorly looped, sleazy, cheap, worthless little wet fart of a movie. Shot under the title En Toter hing in Mitts, which translates to A Corpse Hangs in the Web, The Horrors of Spider Island was originally a West German Yugoslavian horror film that apparently included quite a bit of nudity, probably in the girls playing volleyball vein that was so popular in the nature films of the day. It was originally released in the United States with nude scenes intact under the title It's Hot in Paradise, and after the nude scenes were excised, released as Body in the Web, Girls of Spider Island, and The Spider's Web, in addition to the title you're seeing it under tonight. The nudity is, as was usual at the time and still is, handled by women. This isn't really surprising since at the beginning of the film we meet the largely female cast and they're pretty much uber sluts. All of them are dancers, and in 1960 film logic it goes hand in hand that they'll do anything to land a job. From hiking up their skirts the moment the producer walks into the office to stripping down to whatever undergarments they're wearing without batting an eye. I do have to give the girl who does this credit, however, as she does it with the bored, uninterested air that strippers in movies have to show you that doing this is every day to them is getting a snack out of the fridge. The job they're auditioning for is a dance gig in Singapore, so we get introduced to all the main female characters as they audition. Only a couple of them actually dance, but a good number get chosen for the job. They take off for Singapore, and the aircraft they're in somehow not only catches fire and crashes into the ocean, but also turns into a completely different plane than the one they took off in. The plane crash is a real highlight of the movie and underlines how cheap the production is. The camera cuts from the plane in flames to close-ups of the actresses screaming their heads off in front of a completely black background to rolling waves before jump cutting to the raft they and the producer, Gary, are in, floating in the middle of the ocean. Thankfully, the girls are smart enough to keep their spike-heeled shoes on while floating around on an inflatable rubber raft. They also wear them while walking on the beach and tramping through the jungle, and miraculously, none of them ever twists an ankle. They land on an uncharted island and soon find not only fresh water but a long-handled hammer, which Gary instantly deduces must have been used to excavate some kind of metal, probably uranium. Extrapolating from this conclusion, he figures out that there must be some kind of hut or cabin on the island for the miner to have lived in. They soon find it and the previous occupant strung up like a marionette from what has to be the neatest spider web I've ever seen. Soon after this, we see what turns out to be a giant spider lurking in the bushes. It has 2 huge eyes as opposed to the 8 eyes regular spiders possess, and kind of looks as if it were designed by Walter Keane. To tell you the truth, it's not really giant. It's actually smaller than a wolf spider, only about a foot in diameter, but that's plenty big enough for me. I hate spiders. Nothing makes me climb a wall faster than seeing one of those little 8-legged monsters within 30 feet of where I am. Anyway, Gary gets attacked by the spider while out looking around for something and turns into a hairy-faced, clawed monster. The spider venom seems to be selective in which body parts it affects, though, since only Gary's hands and face change. He attacks and kills one of the girls while she's playing in a lagoon, and then pretty much disappears for the better part of the movie after playing with the hair of another one. From the looks of it, all you have to do is scream to scare him off. When their only male protector disappears and a man-sized monster with fangs and claws takes his place, the girls do what women would do normally in such a situation. They go skinny dipping, fashion bikinis out of God only knows what, and they have cat fights. They're stranded on the island for a month when a supply ship drops off goods. The boat is piloted by the usual sailor types, a stout-hearted man's man and a raging alcoholic misogynist that cares about no one but himself, although that doesn't stop him from trying to bang every woman on the island. From this point on, the movie consists of mostly the sex-starved girls trying to seduce the alky while the lone good girl hooks up with the good sailor and sleazy music plays. The two sailors have the obligatory poorly choreographed fight before kissing and making up in the middle of it. I'm not going to spoil this piece of crap by telling you anymore, so let's take a look at the cast. Alex Darcy was born Alexander Saruf on August 10, 1908 in Cairo, Egypt. He pretty much specialized in playing supporting roles as oily, swarthy types that were too sleazy for actors like Omar Sharif, who he closely resembles. He plays off type in this film as producer Gary Webster, who's actually a pretty nice guy until he gets bitten by the spider. He appeared in 47 films in his career, starting with 1928's La Revanche du Maudit. Some of his better-known films are 1937's The Awful Truth with Irene Dunne and Cary Grant, 1953's How to Marry a Millionaire with Betty Grable and Marilyn Monroe, and 1967's The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, directed by Roger Corman. He died on April 20th, 1966 in Hollywood, California. The rest of the cast appeared only in movies made in Germany, and information about them is scant at best. Since I like to be able to tell you stuff that's at least a little interesting about the various actors that appear in the movies we show, I'm afraid I have nothing much to tell you about them. They look good in spike heels, and a couple of them can dance. That's about it. Well, there is one other thing. Since I know this movie was looped, that is, the dialogue was redubbed in English for the American release, the voice talent, and I use that word loosely, is horrid. Exactly how cheap do you have to be to loop a movie with people that can't talk? Well, they can talk, of course. At the very least, the producers, hired people who could enunciate English. But when it comes to dialects, the women in this movie are obviously supposed to represent a cross-section of young American womanhood, and as such, we have a diverse selection of accents to enjoy. Even the accents in Maniac weren't this bad. Conversely, however, one of the great things about the movie is the dialogue. The first indication of this is the scene where the talent booker back in L.A. is talking on the phone to, one assumes, a family member of one of the girls in the ill-fated flight. He reassures them by saying there's absolutely no reason yet to fear the worst. Until now, we only know that the plane caught fire and we've lost radio contact. Well, thank God. I'll go take a nap. Speaking of taking a nap, now's a good time to start one because it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the horrors of Spider Island, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.